Rolando Estacado. My name is Rolando, and for today's episode, we're going to be revisiting the Sayoc Winkler RnD Tomahawk. We're going to be focusing on the full size and a specific design aspect of the full size. The one thing that has stood out for me about the full size, which I had to kind of wrap my head around because there's a lot of things that about the full size RnD that really got me thinking because it is such a unique design. But knowing that Tuhon Rafael Cayanon had spent so much time investigating the rich history of Filipino martial culture specific to the weaponry, the edged weaponry that Filipinos have, this is something that I take a lot of pride in being Filipino, but also the fact that it is so unique that he was able to blend several of these into the Winkler RnD. So what I did was tried as best as I could to put in as much research and care into the Winkler RnD the same way he has basically devoted his life to the research of the Filipino warfare and Filipino martial tools. So the one thing that stood out for me for the Winkler Sayoc Tomahawk, and it is a feature that I believe is found, I could be wrong, but I think it is only found on the Sayoc Winkler RnD Tomahawk, is in fact its rounded head. If we take a look at the Winkler Sayoc Tomahawk, this rounded head here is something that we only find with the Sayoc Winkler RnD Tomahawk. We don't find them in other Winkler Tomahawks, and we don't necessarily find them in other Tomahawk designs. The majority of Tomahawk designs tend to be flat, linear, and straight across. What we are seeing here is a curved head. Knowing the thought processes, the type of thought and care that Sayoc Kali puts into their art, and especially since this is being handled by Navy SEAL teams, I know that there are no accidents to this design. So I myself did my own research, my own investigation into what possibly this design could mean. And I've come to my own personal conclusions. This is based off of my own personal practice. And this is what I like to call anatomical indexing. As much as I like the idea of punching with it so that it can be used as an impact tool for thrusting, I think there's another reason for it. And it's something that I like to call anatomical indexing. Meaning that when you are in the midst of fog of war and just trying to imagine what kind of things that our special forces teams have to deal with, it's one thing to swing with the tomahawk, which already makes it absolutely lethal. But once we get into close quarters, the idea of making this very fluid is something that becomes far more problematic in close quarters, because maneuvering a tool in close quarters, especially when there's not enough space, the tool itself can become a problem. And I think the creation of this head here was to mitigate that problem. And I think this is what it solves. I think what it does is, from an anatomical indexing purpose, is to, rather than indexing with the edge, there's indexing with the round head of the tomahawk. Let's say, for example, we're getting underneath the chin, and let's imagine that my hand is the chin. I'm going to do this very carefully. In fact, let me do it with something else. Let me do this with the Vulpe's RnD, Daniel Winkler approved, Vulpe's training tomahawk. I think it's safer to do it with this. You're bridging the reactionary gap. You're going from long range grip to close range. And once you get to close range, you get to the bottom of the chin of the adversary. But once there, you have to catch them or neutralize them. And at this point, once they are here, this part isn't necessarily the most dangerous part. Unless you knock them out with it, that's one thing. But let's say you didn't. Let's say this is a very stubborn zombie you're dealing with, right? So let's imagine my hand is my chin, and the idea is that once the top of that tomahawk indexes to my chin, you see the fact that this smooth surface is somewhat rounded. The idea is that the practitioner then follows that roundness, and once it comes off the target, it hooks. So I'm going to do this to myself. Thank you, Chris, for sending this because I can demonstrate it better. In fact, later in the video, I'm going to have my girlfriend Robin demonstrate it on me so that I am the uke. The idea is that if I get hit here, I can then the tomahawk can slide across my chin and then proceed to catch. This is something that's very difficult to do with a tomahawk that's straight, with a straight top, because it's not going to slide across. It's actually there's a little bit of it that's just going to stick around right about here, is still going to apply that pressure, and then the individual can actually just slide off. So the anatomy itself can slide right off that ledge, but this one actually follows the curve of the torso. But you ready for this? There are a lot of curves in the torso that can follow that. The inside of the elbow, the armpit, the back of the knee, the neck again. There's a ton of places where the human body has curves so that the head of the tomahawk can anatomically index it, and then from there we can leverage the catching capabilities of it. I prefer the catching capabilities of the front spike, but I think that there are also catching capabilities on the back spike. I'm going to demonstrate on my coat rack, Howard. I'm going to use the Sayoc Winkler full-size R&D Tomahawk to go ahead and demonstrate how that anatomical indexing can work in real time with the full size. My girlfriend will then demonstrate on me how she can use anatomical indexing of the top of the tomahawk on me with the requisite techniques, with the requisite strategy. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for letting me share.
The round head of the Sayoc Winkler RnD full-size tomahawk is one of the subtle design features that allows the practitioner to implement an anatomical indexing strategy when it comes to implementing the tomahawk. There are 3 sites that I like to use when it comes to using the round head. One of them is right at the neck, underneath the mandible. The second one is at the torso, right at the sternum. And the third one is at the shoulder girdle, right underneath the armpit. So when I'm moving from a long range standpoint, I can go ahead and use a carenza, but once I crash that line, I'm gonna go ahead and use that round head to first apply pressure and impact. So this pressure and impact essentially throws the enemy combatant off. So once I apply that impact, the first one is when I crash in. The second one is when I slide my hand up. So it's almost like a 1-2 punch. Once I have that 1-2 punch and destabilize the opponent and slide it across so that the front spike and the rear spike can catch onto the opponent, and I can now control the entire anatomy. So when I apply pressure on the shoulder girdle, I can slide it forward, and once I slide it forward, the front spike can catch, or I can slide it and that rear spike can catch. That rounded head allows me to slide across the anatomy, allowing me to apply a constant forward pressure on any anatomical indexed sites. By allowing me to do that, I can use the front spike or the rear spike to apply some sort of cutting or slicing or capturing. Once I'm able to apply control onto the shoulder with that rounded head, I can disengage from it and go ahead and strike the opponent with any part of the tomahawk, but always referring back to that rounded head, because once I have that rounded head, I can go ahead and apply that constant forward pressure again. So forward pressure, then I use the spike, forward pressure, and then I use the spike. The straight head of a trench hawk does not allow for this, because what you'll notice is that when I apply this kind of pressure, it has a tendency to completely slide off, and you'll see it on me when I am the uke and demonstration for this, because it doesn't catch the same exact way, because the pressure is not constant, it's actually localized into a single point, whereas the round head of the Sayoc Winkler Tomahawk spreads it out, and when that pressure is spread out, it allows me to capture and apply pressure onto the entire anatomy. So when you see Robin try to do the same exact thing with the Cold Steel Trench Hawk, because it's a localized point, where anytime there's no pressure, I can just slide right off, use my hands and control. When I try to do the same thing with the Sayoc Winkler, that pressure is so spread out that if I try to slide off, the front spike and rear spike can actually capture my neck. So when you see the application of this, first she applies that kind of impact with the reverse spike and front spike, and what you start to see is that initial impact takes control of my entire structure, then that secondary impact actually throws me right off. So now I have very little chance of getting away from this, and now she can apply front spike, rear spike capabilities to control my entire anatomy. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and by the way, no one got hurt here, no boyfriend got hurt. Stick around, stay tuned, more videos to come.